Excellent, thank you. All right, so obviously, everyone, I'm not there in person. I really feel badly about that and apologize. I've got some emerging health stuff I'm dealing with. Hope to get through it, but anyway, I am pleased that modern technology allows me to talk to you guys over the internet. And very much thank Dr. Bernard, Andrew, and Carl for taking over on site. I hope to be on as much as I can. I don't be on the whole time, but I definitely hope to catch up with everybody as best I can. If anybody wants to talk to me, just get on the chat, call me up if you got my contact info, and we can keep communicating. All right, so this is our CAV overview. I've been around for over 30 years, originally founded by Dr. Gary Koopman, who is retired, but now helping run a large company in town, KCF Corporation. I believe Gary should be there for part of this. Then took over, or George Lacerte took over for Gary when Gary retired. And then when George moved up to the Dean's office, I took over for George a few years ago. So the CAV has been, again, around for over 30 years. Obviously, it's, I'm sorry, question?
Yeah. It's actually way worse in my underpants than my toilet. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, I think somebody is online with with their microphone on that probably needs to mute themselves.
It's like wet.
Well, if you feel my pajamas, that's wet. My underpants probably is too.
Hey, Kelly, are you allowed to mute everybody except me?
I cleaned up.
Okay, I think we're good now. It was awesome.
You guys can't hear us.
No, I think somebody's still on there. If whoever is talking in the background can mute yourself, I'd appreciate it. Right. So starting again, CAV is part of Penn State, which has been around quite a long time, over 150 years now. And for those of you that don't know, it's statewide. So we got campuses everywhere. University Park's obviously our biggest, but we've got over 100,000 undergraduates throughout the state. About 40,000 of those here at University Park, and about 6,000 grad students. A lot of alumni, which Penn State is grateful for and rely on for a lot of the initiatives that go on. Those of you who haven't been here a while might have noticed a lot of new construction. A lot of that comes from donations to the alumni. And we are a top 20 research institution in the US. We're well over $1 billion in annual research and development funding. So management, not only am I not there, but some of you may have heard, I retired about a month ago. So I'm kind of the volunteer director at the moment. And Dr. Lissenden, who is on sabbatical, is our associate director. And we are in the process of looking for a new director. So we're going to be chatting with various Penn State faculty who we believe are qualified and interested in doing this, and then transition over the next year. I've really enjoyed doing this. It's been a passion of mine, and I just really appreciated the opportunity to run the CAV and meet a lot of people that are in the audience now. So I'll certainly miss it, but it's been great. Diane is our coordinator. She works over at ESM with Cliff, and she'll be your main point of contact for the student poster competition, which we'll discuss more in a bit. And hopefully everybody's met Kelly by now. She is the works for conferences and institutes, has been running our workshop for many years now, and has been doing an amazing job. So we're very lucky to have Kelly and the team there. Anything you need, contact her. Any visitors should have gotten some special stuff, one of our newsletters, which I'll talk about in a bit, as well as a packet of resumes from grad students that are reasonably close to graduation. I know a lot of our visitors are interested in hiring. So please take advantage of those. And if you didn't get those, go to the front desk and we'll get them to you. So we're broken into 9 affinity groups. There's a lot of vibration acoustic stuff happening at Penn State, spread out over College of Engineering, physics, architecture. It's extremely widespread. This first trio of groups I kind of call the basic physics group. I used to run structural vibration and acoustics, but Dr. Tyler Dare has taken over. Tyler will give the next talk and introduce a recently graduated PhD student of his. It's going to show you some really neat stuff on visualizing vibration with, I'll let them talk about that. It's really a neat topic. Mike Crane runs our flow-induced noise and vibration group, taken over for Dr. Mike Johnson about a year ago. Vic Sparrow has run our propagation and radiation group for a long time. A lot of ties to the FAA and NASA, and you'll in fact hear from NASA and Will Dobler later on the low boom project they've got going on for kinder, gentler supersonic aircraft noise. So those are the three basic physics groups. And then the next trio, broken into applications, Jose Palacios runs our adaptive structures and noise control group, and that includes some active control as well. And a lot of good stuff for the rotorcraft group. You'll notice that there's some overlap as you go through the next 2 days. These aren't perfect divisions, so a lot of times you'll see different groups kind of touching the same kind of topic, but that's absolutely fine. That's actually a good thing. We encourage cross-pollination and a lot of cross-discussion. The Systems and Structures Health Management Group, that's Carl Reichard, who you'll see tomorrow, and Cliff Lissenden, again, who's on sabbatical, so you won't. But a lot of neat stuff happening in there with diagnostics and more importantly, prognostics. Just what can you measure in a vibrating, radiating system to tell you how healthy it is, and if there is something funny going on, how much time you have before things are going to get bad. Ed Smith has run the rotorcraft acoustics and dynamics group for many, many years. And this is actually a smaller part of his job at Penn State because he also runs the Center of Excellence for rotorcraft. There's 3 universities across the country that are part of that, and we're one of them. And this has been Ed's passion for decades. So you'll probably hear a little bit about that as well. And then the last 3 I've kind of lumped into what I'm calling emerging areas. One of those is metamaterials. This used to be the acoustic materials group, but a few years ago we added metamaterials. And Murad Odic from the graduate program in acoustics has just taken over that from Dr. Amanda Hanford, who ran it for many years. And so you'll be seeing some new stuff from him, I believe, tomorrow. And then Juliana Simon has been running our biomedical acoustics group for a while. This is just a really neat group. It's a little bit outside the typical CAV area, but they're using a lot of the same physics, really. A lot of ultrasonic stuff, imaging, but it's all sound waves, just in different media, different frequencies, and just really high-tech methodologies and procedures to get at the kind of stuff that the biomedical people are after. So I think those are always neat to look at and look for parallels with, how can we use this technology in our other areas. And then finally, we started this about 3 years ago. It's clear just by looking at the technical conferences that are out there and what's happening in the literature, that machine learning and artificial intelligence it's a big thing, right? It's not just for selling stuff on Amazon or tracking movements on Microsoft. It's how can we use this in vibration and sound? And there's lots of ways of doing that. There's some fair number of overlaps with the Systems and Structures Health Management Group because they use machine learning all the time. And so you'll see Carl there as well, and then Danny Wong. Okay, so those are our affinity groups. And in each one, if you go to our CAV website, you can find those group leaders, as well as the faculty and the students who are in those groups. And they've got contact info if you want to reach out to any of them. But I do recommend if you want to connect with a group, starting with the group leads. So it's another big part of Penn State is our graduate program in acoustics. It's not part of the CAV. The CAV is not part of the grad program in acoustics. The grad program in acoustics grants degrees. They give out masters and PhDs and masters of engineering in acoustics. It's the only program like that in the country. CAV, we are outreach. That's the way I like to differentiate between the two. We talk to corporate sponsors, government liaisons, international liaisons, more about that in a bit. We're all about connecting our faculty and students with the outside world. So no degrees as part of the CAV. That's the graduate program in acoustics job. Website is up on the top there, acs.psu.edu, and there's Andrew, who you've already met, and he'll be giving a bigger overview this afternoon. But I did want to highlight one key thing here, and he'll obviously repeat it later on. And that's our distance education program. The acoustics program was one of the first to really do this. I remember when I first arrived at Penn State back in the late 90s. I gave distance education courses to corporate and government folks in a television studio, WPSU's television studio. And there were a few corporations that actually had these fancy video conferencing centers, 25 years ago. But a lot of it, they recorded my lectures on like videotapes, VHS videotapes, and then put them in some big copying machine where they could crank out like a dozen at a time. And then Chris Popovich, who still works in the acoustics program, and mail them all off to the different companies. And people would go sit in a conference room and watch the recorded lecture. We've come a long way since then. Now it's all done on Zoom. It's all there. You can interact, obviously much better. But the key thing is that if you're working for a corporation, government agency, and there's just one topic you really want to learn more about, you can do that. You don't have to sign up for a full degree. You can just take a couple of courses. Andrew will go through some of the details on this later, but it's for degrees as well as just boning up on a topic that you're interested in. So every semester, several courses are offered online. These are always taught at the same time as the residence courses. So you're there with the resident students, they're in a classroom, you're in your home. If you can't watch at the same time, the recordings are there. It's no problem. Here's what's coming up in the spring. So we got some transducers, acoustics and fluid media, signal analysis, if you're into that, architectural acoustics, and then we've got some aeroacoustics. That last course is not offered very often. So if you're interested in that, definitely jump on it. And try the website. It'll give you the details, how much it costs, how to connect. It's all very easy. And talk to Andrew if you have any questions. So our website is cav.psu.edu. I think most of you have been there at some point. Got upgraded a couple years ago, so it looks really nice. And one of the things that I encourage you to have a look at first is our newsletter. There's a link to it on the homepage, but there's also a newsletters page. And the current one, you just click on it, up it comes. It's put together by our editorial and printing group at Penn State, and they just do a really nice job. All we do is just dump content on them. They put it in a nice format, looks like a pro magazine. Visitors, hopefully you've gotten one of those. If not, stop by the front desk. And a great way to catch up in general on what's going on, as well as there's a nice big section in the back that gives you highlights for each technical group. And obviously some of those highlights you'll see today. And those of you that are just at Penn State, sorry we didn't have enough handouts for you, but obviously you can go to the website and find that yourself. Some of the contents this month, we got a feature on Andrew. And then about a month and actually maybe 2 months ago, we also hosted a symposium by the Transportation Research Board, TRB, and had a nice big turnout there. So a little bit on that. And then kind of a nice feature on some architectural acoustics work that was done as part of a Ph.D. research program. So catch up on all of that, as well as the technical groups. One of the other neat topics that I always like reminding people about is we keep track of all of our student theses. So if you go to the, I believe it's the resources up above, you should be able to find a drop down to that, or might be able to research, but it's there. And what this does is allow you to search for keywords, the student author, and then it'll just pop right up. Right now, you're just looking at like a chronological listing. The theses that are through 2021 are in there. At the end of each year, I go through, find all of the theses that reference anything having to do with acoustics and vibration, and we dump them in the database. And what this does is it links to the Penn State library system. So if you were to go ahead and click on any one of those blue titles, it would jump you over to the library system, and you would see an abstract, student name, the advisors, as well as a link in almost all cases to a PDF of the thesis. Sometimes the thesis is held back a little bit. Students are allowed to do that if there's some intellectual property they want to hold on. So that's pretty rare, but it does happen. So you'll see a little PDF available question mark there. Yes. If it's a no, then you got to wait a while. Some of the older theses also say no. It was before we had all the PDFs, but just about all of them that are in the last 20 years or so. Click on it, download it, and there you go. And if you want to follow up with a student, that can be a little tricky sometimes, but most of the advisors should still be around. You got to be able to find them. If not, contact me, contact Diane, and we can try to connect you with somebody. We put on seminars throughout the semester. Really haven't done a great job of that this semester yet, but there are a couple coming up, and hopefully more to come. And starting in the beginning of the COVID days, we fired up a YouTube channel. So Penn State Center for Acoustics and Vibration. There's a link to that on our regular website, so easy to find. And we group them into different semesters. So you'll find seminars for last semester, the previous one, et cetera. And they go back a few years. There's some of the older ones we still haven't gotten switched over to YouTube, but they go back a little ways. And also the last few workshops are in there as playlists as well. And when this workshop is over, Kelly will upload our talks and you'll be able to watch those after the fact. So check that out. A bunch of neat modern topics, a lot of AI machine learning going on in there, which you might have interest in. Really the lifeblood of our CAV and why we're here is our corporate sponsors. So each of you guys pay an annual fee. We very much appreciate that. That helps pay for the workshop that we're in right now, pay for the newsletter, pay for our student poster competition, and bringing in outside speakers for our seminars. So thank you very much for that. A lot of you guys have been sponsors for a long time, and believe me, it's very much appreciated. So here's our current list. Pretty diverse group, which I'm quite pleased about. I mean, it's really all over the place, you know, from government folks, Navy folks. Obviously, there's a big Navy presence at Penn State, but a lot of, you know, products, technologies. It's really a fun, diverse group, and I always enjoy talking to everybody. Got a couple of new ones. Cruz is from GM. Welcome. I think there might be a couple of folks online from them. But that's electric cars. We've talked to a few car people over the years, and the noise and vibration challenges with electric vehicles are very, very different than what you might get in a traditional vehicle. All that engine noise is gone, and a lot of the new focus is on trying to make the inside of a car really a pleasant experience. At some point, you know, we're not quite there yet, but at some point you're going to be able to get on the interstate and do hands off and just go from point A to point B, and then people are going to want to watch movies and listen to stuff, and you need that experience to be quiet. So you know, a lot of different things to think about in noise and vibration. Cummins, they're just huge. They do all kinds of stuff. The folks we've been talking to are doing mufflers, catalytic converters, things like that, you know, just absorbing bad stuff before it gets dumped out into the environment. But anytime you run a lot of high-speed flow through something, you're going to get noise. And so we're chatting with them about how to mitigate that kind of stuff. So welcome, Cruz, and welcome, Cummins. Hope to continue our relationship with you guys for years to come. We always have corporate guests, folks that are just trying us on for size, that aren't yet members. And so this year we have 3, hopefully a few of you in the live audience. Curtis Wright, a lot of connections to some of our other corporate sponsors. So welcome, and hope you guys find us of a benefit and join up. HMMH, a consulting firm, they came for the Transportation Board review a couple of months ago, and I believe they're somewhere in the audience today. Looking for students, looking for connections with faculty. So Penn State folks, if you see the corporate guests around, please introduce yourself to them. Last one is Newport News Shipbuilding, owned by Huntington Ingalls. And Newport News has been a corporate sponsor in the past. And then a lot of our advocates went other places. And so they kind of dropped off for a bit, but we've re-engaged with them. And I believe we have a couple of people there. So same thing to you guys. Hope you find us of use, and we can bring you on as corporate sponsors going forward. Any questions you guys have, you know, talk to the faculty there. I'm available by phone or by chat, and we can keep the discussion going. So welcome. So here's what you get as a corporate sponsor, obviously admission to the workshop that you're in now. And one of the things I always talk to about new corporate sponsors or potential sponsors is this is a great way to recruit our graduate students. We're going to have the student poster competition, which I'll chat about in a minute. No better way to interview somebody on the spot. And they're prepared for this. They're hoping for this. So they're looking for opportunities. Obviously, you can also meet with our faculty and then meet other corporate sponsors, government folks, as well as this is always a fun thing for me is talking to our foreign university liaisons. There's always neat stuff happening outside the US that quite frankly, we just may not know much about, or other countries are just better at than us. And it's always invigorating for me to talk to the foreign liaisons and just kind of get inspired about directions to go after learning what they're up to. Another big part of corporate sponsorship, we used to call this a day of consulting, then it was switched to a day of advising. And by the time our Penn State lawyers got through with it, it is now a day of individualized educational guidance. Same thing. What it essentially means is we'll give you a day of advice. Usually what happens is we get on the phone with a corporate sponsor, find out about a particular problem they're having. Excuse me. And I figure out what kind of, or which of our faculty are best suited to help with that. And we set up a follow-on to talk about it. Sometimes an NDA is signed. That can take a little while, but it's not forever. But you're definitely talking about a few weeks there. But once we have that, we can, usually these days we sit on Zoom, but in the past we have some people on site. We can still do that. And then just learn about your problem, suggest ways of solving it. I'll give you a really nice example of that in a minute. Something other people have asked for is like a mini short course. Somebody comes in and just sort of gives a dump of all the stuff they're doing and a research topic of interest. That's also perfectly acceptable. So really, we're very flexible on how we do this. Jose Palacios has also volunteered like a day of like testing. So if there's something you want measured that can be done in a day, that's something that we can think about as well. So it's just a day for you to help us help you. And if it leads to something more, great. If it doesn't, that's still fine. Our job is to interact with you and help you. There's no short course this year. The one we had last year, I think the travel is still kind of a little funky for people. So we're still thinking about what our short course is going to be going forward. We might think about a hybrid model next year, but we're still trying to work that out. But if and when we have one again, and we probably will, you get a free tuition waiver, and there's more details on the CAV site about how many you get depending on your level of sponsorship. And then once you sign on, we put you on our email distribution list, and anytime there is a seminar by a group, you'll know about it. We'll include the main point of contact we have in that email, but if you guys want others on the distribution, we're fine with that. Just let us know. We'll put them on. The more the merrier. And we like having nice big turnouts for our seminars. So that's another benefit for corporate membership. Here is a neat example of an advising day that turned into a small project. So here's Dr. Dare again. And a few years ago, Susanna Ruffiner and Tom Flynn from Babcock and Wilcox came to us with a problem. And the problem was this: at certain conditions in one of their furnaces, they were getting really loud, low frequency noise. Just the whole thing was shaking around you. You kind of felt it more than you heard it because the frequencies were pretty low. And it started off with just an advising day. And then Tyler and Bill Bonas, his colleague, put together a little proposal, got sponsored, and this involved going on site to a plant, instrumenting a furnace, and essentially figuring out the problem, and got written up in a conference paper for the Internoise 2018. So there's a citation up there. And this got pretty involved, right? So there's a bunch on here. Let me just walk through it quickly. This is a spectrogram, which is just a spectrum kind of in the vertical direction. So here's frequency. You can see how low this is. And over on the x-axis, it's really time. Right? So this is going on over time. And then down below is something called the firing rate. It's just, I won't go into the details on that, but it's really a function of how that furnace is operating. But they tracked the firing rate along with the noise. They found some neat stuff. All of these kind of colored bars you're seeing here, this is really loud. There's a primary tone at about 10 hertz, and these are all overtones. This tells you right away when you have the overtones, it's a nonlinear signal. It's not just a sine wave, it's a sawtooth or a square or something else crazy. And these fire up at certain times, then they go away. Then they come back, and they go away. And they're able to find that at certain firing rates is when they hit that sweet spot. If the firing rate went up, it went away. You can see a direct correlation there. And then they went off and instrumented their furnished a bunch of accelerometers. The little red filled circles are just what happens at this particular frequency. And you can see the entire thing just bulging in and out. There's clearly like kind of a big low order resonance, looks like a Helmholtz resonance in here going on. It's tied to the thermoacoustics of the firing rate. And again, all the details are in here, but this is high-end stuff, right? Penn State faculty can come to your place and really help you, as well as students. So it can go beyond just a day of advising. How to sponsor work? There's something called the Penn State funding matrix, and there's a link down here. The easiest and cheapest way is to do it as a gift, but then there's no real guarantee of IP, so a lot of people don't like that. You can do grants, you can do contracts. One of the big questions that always comes up is who owns the intellectual property. I will say this, Penn State many years ago significantly relaxed their IP requirements. A lot of universities, they just claim they own everything. But Penn State's a lot more flexible about that. So it's really up to you and the faculty member. And the faculty member is okay giving you the IP, then the terms and conditions always apply, but it can be worked out. So just have a look at that funding matrix, and if you have any more questions, let me know or others know. We can talk you through it. Government liaisons are another big part of our outreach. They don't pay for membership. The government sponsors Penn State in a lot of different areas, and so it doesn't make sense to charge for that. Here are current government liaisons. The ones that have red boxes around them have representatives here at the workshop. And they will be giving talks, and a lot of them are here to hire. So graduate students, faculty with graduate students, keep that in mind. So Will Dobler, who is a Penn State grad, will be representing NASA Langley. Anthony Bonomo, representing Carderock, Naval Surface Warfare Center, Carderock Division. And Dr. O. Williams, another Penn State grad, one of the first, is here from the Naval Research Laboratory. Again, looking for more ways of connecting with Penn State, and I believe with some NRL internship opportunities. So each one of those folks will talk a bit about their organization, which we look forward to. And then mention our international liaisons. This is always exciting to find out what's going on overseas. Only 3 folks here this year, but hey, it's better than none, which was, well, actually we had 1 last year. Better than none, this is what it's been during the COVID days. So we're welcoming Dr. Hervé Denayer from KU Leuven in Belgium. These guys are great, always doing neat stuff. So we look forward to hearing from him. Felix Langfeld, I believe, is a first-time rep from Institute of Sound and Vibration Research in the UK. So looking forward to hearing from Felix, welcome. And then Olivier Robin is a longtime CAV collaborator, visited us many times. And we really appreciate his connections. And he is at the University of Sherbrooke, and they have just renamed their research group to something called CRASH. And I'll let him explain what CRASH means. It's a really cool name. So, and we also are grateful for the continued interaction with the rest of our liaisons. They're not here today, but they're with us in spirit, and we hope to see them in future workshops. So agenda, today, tomorrow at the hub, we're right where you are now. Got breakfast for you, got lunch for you. Tonight is the big social, and it's at the Pagula Ice Arena. And any issues of getting there, just talk to Kelly, talk to anybody at the front desk. And I believe there should be some directions online, maybe some handouts. It's not that hard. We're not on the ice. It's up at an event space upstairs. It's beautiful. You can see all the big picture windows. So if the weather's nice, get a nice view of everything. And just a really fun place to visit and have an event at. The students will be sitting or standing with their posters. There'll be 12 of them. Poster competition, always a highlight of the workshop. And we have a lot of our corporate sponsors online this time. So we're going to open up the judging to our guests and PSU faculty. The only restriction is if you are an advisor of a student in a competition, please do not judge. There'd be obviously a conflict of interest, but any faculty member that has no students in the game, you're encouraged to help judge the students along with our guests. Evaluation forms will be handed out. Look for Diane and Kelly for that. They're very simple, just rate them 1 to 10. That's it. 10 being the best. And Kelly's going to send out to those of you that are online actually, it's not a Google form. I think it's a Microsoft form, or maybe it's Google, but it's whatever it is, it'll be easy, right? You just rate the ones you go to 1 to 10. All the posters are online. Kelly should have sent you some info about that. And Diane will be tabulating them in the morning. So those of you that are off site, please get your evaluations in by midnight tonight. There will be a workshop next year. We have not set the dates. Cliff and I need to work with whoever the new director is on that. But the intent is to keep using the nice room you're in now. And I think hybrid is here to stay. So we can anticipate some online access as well. But we do always encourage you to try to come in person. That's the best way to connect with us. So that's my overview. I think we'd have maybe time for a question or two, and then we can turn it over to the next speaker.
Any questions for Steve?
Yeah, I think I hear something way off in the distance.
That was me, Steve.
Okay.
Question. So throughout the course of the day, if anyone has questions, we have a microphone over here that you can either come up to, or Kelly can bring that to you so that the folks online can hear you. It looks like we have no questions, Steve.
Okay, thanks again, everybody, and I look forward to being online as much as I can and connecting with you. All of you guys that are online, I think we can chat with each other, and a lot of you guys have my contact info, so yeah, contact me anytime. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So just a few words for our speakers before we get rolling into our program here. To advance the slides, there's a clicker up here that you're going to use. The slides are actually housed back at Kelly's station. Kelly wave, so everyone can see you. So you control them with this, not with the computer. Please stand in front of the podium here, because the microphone is how the people hear online. And if you watch, if I move too far this way, they can't see me or hear me. So we want everyone online to have the same experience. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. This is our Structural Vibration and Acoustics group, which is headed by Dr. Tyler Dare. But we have Dr. Ben Beck here, and also newly minted Dr. Sean Collier.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. So as Andrew said, I am not Tyler Dare. I'm Ben Beck. Tyler couldn't make it this morning, but I did want to, so I've been a part of this group since I started at Penn State 8 years ago. So I'll help introduce the students and go over the slides that were put together on this topic. Mostly overview of the student progress that we've made in the Structural Acoustics and Vibrations group. So you can see a lot of members here, so we'll go through that. So let's see if this will work. There we go. All right, so student posters first. So I have a student working with me, Anna Morehouse, and a ex-Penn State faculty member, Micah Shepard. She's going to be presenting on acoustic black holes in composites airframe stiffeners. So if you have a chance to get to the student poster competition, please go see hers. She's done some nice work looking at predictions of vibration characteristics of optimized composites. There's a lot of other student research going on in this group. You can read the titles yourselves, but if you have a chance to stop any of these great students, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to talk about their research. And then we also had 3 students, technically 4 students. Sean will have the full talk here at the end, but he's not listed on the other slides, but he'll be graduating this fall, as well as James Chatterley in the spring, Cameron McCormick, and you, Dr. Conlon and Ed Smith student. And you can see their titles, that all of them did really great work as well. And then lastly, to wrap up my 30 seconds of talking, is to introduce Sean. So Dr. Sean Collier is going to be talking about surface vibration measurements with phase-based optical flow. And lucky for myself, as well as the Applied Research Lab, he started working for us here in the past few weeks. And so he's going to go over his PhD research now. So kick it away, Sean.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to CAV. I'm very excited to be talking with you today. As Ben said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about my PhD research that I did under Dr. Tyler's air, which was looking at surface vibration measurements with a computer vision method called Phase Based Optical Flow. And we'll get a little bit into how all of that works together and what all of that means. But just to start, I want to talk a little bit about what vibration measurements sort of look like on the day-to-day, especially in industry. Typically, when you're using traditional accelerometers, laser Doppler vibrometers that are sort of fixed in one position, this is the picture you get. So we can see vibration happening, we can see time data, we can place our sensors in different places so that we can make out things that would otherwise be masked by symmetry. But we're not seeing the whole picture, right? We're just seeing a few discrete points, and then we have to sort of interpolate beyond to get a bigger idea. Camera-based measurements work much more like our vision, right? So we're capturing typically a full field image. If we can't capture the whole thing, we can sort of do a panorama and stitch them together. But when you do this sort of operation, every pixel starts to act like a mechanical sensor. We can start to extract vibration from every pixel in the image. So we can take things like videos or images, we can pick some location and we can extract time data. We can extract frequency data just as you would with a normal Excel. To its credit, and specifically phase-based optical flow, we can then do things like motion magnification, which is a hot topic that came around in 2014 that you may have heard of, but an incredibly powerful tool for structural health monitoring, for communication with advisors, with corporate sponsors, things like this. And I talked a little bit more about this in the CAV presentation I gave in February, if you want to learn more about motion magnification. And then finally, you can do all this typical things. So you can take all of this data that you've measured and then do things like modal analysis, all the good stuff that you normally do. So just in general, optical methods tend to relate changes in intensity to motion. So we have these images. The question then is, how do we take them and get out the displacement signals that we want, the surface vibrations? Truly, at its simplest, it's just a subtraction between the two of them. So can't really make it out. People on Zoom are getting a better view, but all the pixels that aren't really seeing a lot of motion, where there's pixels without a lot of intensity change, they show up as just these black, basically background pixels. They kind of zero out. Pixels which are observing a lot of intensity change show up as these bright spots or these speckles. And these pixels become the pixels of interest. These become our measurement locations. There are lots and lots of ways to do this. The most ubiquitous, I think, is digital image correlation. And many of you probably already use that in practice where you work. DIC works through cross correlation, so standard thing from 1D signal processing. In 2D, it looks a little bit like this. So on the far left, I have two images separated in time, and I'm looking at a particular cell with a speckle pattern. And that speckle pattern is unique so that we can pick a speckle in the first image, scooch all around in my second image, and find where those two images are most correlated. When you line them up like that through cross correlation, that essentially gives you the displacement vector. And that's sort of what's shown in the middle there. Cross correlation at its heart can be thought of in the Fourier transform domain, where we're looking at phase. So if you think about phase of a signal, it's sort of where that signal is in time or space. And we'll come back to that. But again, in general, you can do this cross correlation and get to displacement very easily through images. There's another sort of aspect to this, though, which is that the Fourier transform sort of dictates how well DIC can do. So a common issue in time and frequency domain is that when you have really good resolution in one, you sort of smear out the other. So if you have really resolved data in time, things smear out in frequency and vice versa, which means that you sort of have this drawback with DIC of if you have this really high resolution image, your frequency domain data and thus your phase is sort of obscured a little bit. And this hinders how small the resolvable motion can be. There are workarounds that come from normal 1D signal processing. You can sort of do this Goldilocks search where you mess with the resolution in one to try and fix the other one. What's more common is to zero pad or to interpolate in the frequency domain. And then another issue with the Fourier transform is that it's not local. So if you have a bunch of tiny motions happening individually, just the Fourier transform can't deal with that. So you have to incorporate windowing. And that was sort of what I showed you before with that little search window and searching through the image. So that's DIC. That's the normal way that people go about doing this. Another way is optical flow. So optical flow, rather than dealing with trying to search in adjacent images for similar things, we can just work with time differences, like I showed you before in the top, and then edges. So these edges, or this edge content of the image, becomes the carriers of local motion. So what you need for optical flow typically is a pretty textured or a structure that has a lot of surface images or surface lines on it. But you can combine this in an informed way and do the exact same thing. You can get back to the same deformation field. Unlike DIC, there's not a transform necessarily that's restricting how small your motion can go. Again, we're just using these local edges as the carriers of motion and changes of intensity. So as a little cartoon there, you see this edge progressing across the screen and how that changes the intensity of the image, which means that the smallest resolvable motion is related to the bit depth of the image. The bit depth being how many steps you have in between purely white and purely black. So a really high bit depth image, like 8-bit or 16-bit, which you may have seen when you look at properties on your computer. A 16-bit image will give you a really fine resolution for motion extraction. There's a sort of synthesis of these two things, which is phase-based optical flow, and which is the method that I've been looking at. So you take this idea of phase and that you can relate motions through phase, and you combine it with optical flow. It was introduced in 1990 by Alan Jepson and David Fleet, and it was remodernized in 2014, 2013 by the CSAIL, or Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Group at MIT. And again, you might have seen some of their research. There's an infamous video of extracting speech from a paper chip, or potato chip bag. As I said, it's a combination of these two things, and it provides full field non-contact motion information like all vision methods, but to its credit, it typically requires no surface preparation. So if you're familiar with DIC, you often have to apply a speckle pattern. There's a sister method, I like to think of it, to phase-based optical flow called deflectometry, which has been talked about in the past. Deflectometry typically requires a mirror surface and purely smooth things. So phase-based optical flow sort of fills in that gap. If I don't apply surface preparation, if I have a naturally textured surface, I can extract motion from the video. Just to get into the weeds a tiny, tiny bit, the phase bit, as I said, there's no Fourier transform involved. The phase bit comes from these complex steerable filters, and these are already programmed up. There's a bank of them. You don't have to really deal with this part. And what these are a pair of spatial bandpass filters. So if you're familiar with signal processing, oftentimes you're bandpassing out a frequency of interest. You can do the exact same thing in space. You can filter out spatial frequencies of interest. And what these truly are, as I said, are 1D spatial bandpass filters rotated in space because images are 2D. And then what we want to do is say, I want to look at motion exactly in the X direction, or motion just in the Y direction, or off some angle of 45. So we can then do is sort of discretize out these filters to get filters that are steered in particular directions. Then you apply these to your image and all the processing proceeds. Again, all of this is sort of under the hood. This isn't anything you have to worry about. Now, the idea of phase-based optical flow was that it was designed to be a motion extraction tool. However, it's really seen its practice in being combined with DIC. So as I said, DIC has a pretty high lower bound of how small motion it can extract. So what people tend to do is motion magnify videos so that the motion is large enough for DIC to see, and then they proceed on with their typical, usual, familiar processing. But again, phase-based optical flow should be able to do that all by itself. So that was really what I started looking into, and how good is this method to do that. Here's one big summary plot of a lot of research I've been doing. I made a lot of synthetic cantilevered beams, which you see on the far right there. So these were coded up in Blender, if you're familiar. But what I did was I went through steps of noise. So I started with a noiseless case, sort of the most ideal, will probably never happen in real life. And then sort of up the noise and looked at how well it did over time. And you can see sort of the general trend that you'd expect. So with no noise, it does very, very well. It matches the exact line, the exact being measured matches perfectly to expected. When you start increasing noise, the resolution goes down. And so that prompted the question of, well, okay, I have this method. How can I know, getting my specific test scenario, if I can use phase-based optical flow? And that led to this little metric in the bottom right, which is quite simple. It's a back of the napkin calculation where all you really need is the temporal noise of your pixel of interest, the bit depth that I talked about before, that 2n to the -1, And then that denominator is just the contrast or how strong that edge is. And you can see that the data asymptotes out pretty well to that initial guess. So for a back of the napkin calculation, just a real quick thing, it does incredibly well. So through this research, the smallest lower bound that I got to was about 0.25, 10 to the minus 3 pixels, which is incredibly small, right? So if you think about how small a pixel is to begin with, taking an incredibly small fraction of that. So you can pick up some very incredibly tiny motions with this. Another factor that might be influential is, again, how strong the edge is or the contrast of the image. So all of these C hats are normalized contrasts. So C hat 1 is pure white to pure black. 0.5 is that sort of matte gray to 0. And then you have that just noticeable difference at the bottom there. The same trends happen, right? So as we decrease contrast, these edges are carriers of motion. So as the edges get worse, the method gets worse. But what's important to note here is that this incredibly poor case, this just noticeable difference between 0.1 and 0, asymptotes out to the nominal lower bound of DIC. So through all the literature from the revision spec sheet, about 1/100th of a pixel is the lower bound of DIC. And it is the same lower bound of PBOF when giving it a very unideal case. So to its credit, PBOF seems to be really applicable in cases where DIC will fail. And then as good experimentalists, I did this in the lab with real data with a real beam and saw pretty similar results where we have a lower bound that's pretty comparable when you add noise. And you can get a little bit lower if you just look at the spectral density content. But overall, walking away with this with the idea that PBOF is pretty good at what it does for incredibly small motions. This video is wonky again, but what this is a fan blade with texture and it's rotating through space. So PBOF, though it's really good for small motions, it fails for large ones. So DIC, really good for capturing large deflections and motions, PBOF, not so much. The question then was, well, how can I expand it? How can I increase its efficacy so that it does a good job all by itself? One solution, and the one that I've introduced into the literature called pixel pushing, is just about using information in a really informed way. And the idea is as simple as a balance beam scale from the doctor's office or from your physics class, where you can try and measure the weight of a mass by starting with the small scale. So you scooch all the way across, you exhaust that small scale, you bump over the next biggest and repeat with the small scale. And you can keep iterating this process until you measure the whole weight of the mass. I can do the exact same thing with PBOF. So I know precisely when my edge reaches a pixel boundary because it's really good at measuring sub-pixel motions. And then because I can steer my filters in particular directions, I can constrain the motion in 1D. All I have to do is bump over to my nearest pixel of interest. And in that way, I can capture all of this large relevant motion. So here you see it doing a fine job with a real life cantilevered beam. And the same with this sort of synthetic bumpy cube, where this cube is rotating with quite large visible motion, but is also vibrating subpixely, so incredibly small and visible motion at the same time. And it's doing a fine job of capturing both of these things simultaneously, a property that PBOF didn't have before. So in this way, pixel pushing, which I introduced, allows for an intuitive, succinct, and efficient approach to handling large, important or unimportant motions just using PBOF. So we haven't had to combine it with DIC or some other method to sort of bridge the boundaries between these two domains. And again, because it's this full field thing, we can see how the motion evolves. And I was just focused on this lower fan blade, but because it's in the image, I'm also capturing information about that higher fan blade too. So in this way, PBOF is a very powerful tool, though still in its infancy, still needs some development, but I'm willing to work on it if you are. And you too can do phase-based optical flow. So there are lots of algorithms, there are lots of packages on the market that you can buy and set it up and it's like a black box. But if you want to dig a little bit into the MATLAB, all of this code is free. So if you already have DIC, if you already have the high-speed cameras, it's not a big investment. So you just go to software, you download these codes, you run them in MATLAB, and you can treat it like a big black box if you want. But if you want to understand, I'm more than happy to do that with you. So just to recap with some closing thoughts. The noise floor is higher than traditional sensors. Remember that accels have been designed for hundreds, well, not hundreds of years, but a very long time to be good at what they do. Cameras, this camera-based vibration measurement idea is pretty new, so cameras are kind of catching up on that. It is, well, it was restricted to stationary motions within a few pixels. Pixel pushing kind of developed this further. And in the past, it was restricted to single camera in plane motion, so just left or right or up and down. Some of my PhD work has worked around this, and you can see that in the dissertation later, once it's out and about. Again, it typically requires no surface preparation. You can extract motions below the current limit of DIC. As with all camera-based measurements, you get simultaneous and full field. And it provides a high-resolution non-contact motion extraction tool, but it again is also this visual magnification tool for communication with whomever you want to share that with. As I said, as I said, these are areas of current research for me, and if you want to talk about those more, I'm happy to do so. And with that, thank you. Yeah.
When you said no surface prep is needed, have you looked at this on highly polished surfaces?
Right, so highly polished will probably fail with this. But if you have machine marking, so if you're just getting like a rough and ready plate or beam or something like that, those fine machine markings I've found to be just good enough to do this. But for polished surfaces, you'll probably have to work closer to deflectometry.
Yeah, because we tried to do, when we used optical chirography for doing gear tooth profile measurements, we found that like precision gears just had too smooth a surface. So we had to do like an acid etch, at least on test articles, to get enough roughness to get that scattering that you needed for the light. So
gotcha.
It's interesting.
Yeah, the other thing too is if you're not concerned with sort of any interior motion, if you just want to know about sort of is my flange on my gear moving, this can still do that because that flange in and of itself is an edge. So it's important to remember those two things too, that you have surface texture, but also that the object itself can be an edge to extract motion from.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm reading something that, so can you do absolute vibration measurements or they're still relative? Can you ensure that when you're measuring 1 micrometer, it's actually 1 micrometer? I missed that point.
No, I didn't touch on it. So yes, you can get absolute vibration measurements. There's nothing relative about PVOF. That is something that's going on in the literature. People who do motion magnification and they're like, look, displacements. But for in-plane motions with a flat perpendicular object, you can do the simple millimeters per pixel conversion. So my object is 45 millimeters in real life. It's 45 pixels in the image. So that's your conversion. But in general, you can do triangulation with 2 cameras, sort of relate them in world space and go through it that way and get an absolute measurement.
Thanks.
Hey, Sean, this is Steve Hambric. Again, great talk. I always enjoy watching you speak. I wanted to point out one thing to the audience, and that's a longer version of this as a seminar that Sean gave I think last semester. You can find it on the YouTube channel. Okay. And the other question I had, Sean, if a company wanted to stand up something like this is kind of putting you on the spot, but do you have a rough idea what the buy-in cost would be, the camera, anything else you need, plus maybe a little bit of time getting the software up and running?
Yeah, so you'd need MATLAB. So I'm not sure the running cost of a MATLAB license, but you need MATLAB. And then depending on what you're trying to measure, your camera can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. So just like normal signal processing, this method is limited only by the Nyquist rate of the camera and of course the noise floor, but more so the Nyquist rate. So if your thing is vibrating at low frequencies, like we've been seeing a lot of 20, 30, 40 hertz, the high speed function on your iPhone can do just fine. It can go up to 120 frames per second, can do a good job, and people have done that before. If you have things of much, much higher frequency, then you'll need things like phantom high-speed cameras, which can cost you tens of 20s of thousands of dollars. So it can be as little or as much as you want it to be, which I know isn't a great answer, but is really the truth of it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that talk, Sean. I'm aware we're having some audio issues online, so I'm gonna try talking very close to this microphone. Does that sound any better, Steve?
No, unfortunately, I think the mic's picking up fine. It's just something with it being transmitted over to
Look at it.
same thing with a room mic. But it is audible. It's just fuzzy.
Just cutting in and out.
No, it's just distorted. Like it's some gain is set to max somewhere. It's just yeah, you just sound kind of buzzy, you know.
Okay, well, I'll introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is one of our international liaisons, Dr. Olivier Robin from University of Sherbrooke. And he's going to be introducing the new crash group there. And just to preview some of the things that they're doing. So those of you online can see this, and hopefully you can see this up, yeah, on the screen, perfect. So they have this new really cool book out about how we can relate science and engineering to those not in our field. And what they're doing is making comics out of science and engineering topics. So really cool stuff. We have these here if people want to look at them. And we've got Olivier's got a copy as well. So I hope I didn't steal all your thunder, but pretty excited to have you here and hear what you have to say. So thank you. So just forward and backward. That's perfect. Yep.
Okay. Let's put it there. Well, good morning. Thanks for the invitation. Hello, Steve. Online. So I'm Olivier Robin, Olivier Robin, whatever you want. So I'm still doctor. I moved to an assistant professor position at Ghost, that is now Crash. So maybe today there are, I would say, 3 goals in my presentation. First, what is Crash? Because we've been known as Ghost for a lot of years now, so it's important to explain what's happening. Then I'm present the work of several of my colleagues. It's difficult to present all of them because you see now I got nearly like 19 colleagues, so it's difficult to do this in 30 minutes. Then I'll focus on what I do, especially on the 3 things that we have to do as a professor: research, train, and disseminate. So first, where is Sherbrooke? That's an important question, but same applies when we go into State College. It's like, where is it? So, but I managed to do the trip again. And again, thank you for welcoming me. So this is the US, this is Canada, and there's a rectangle here. And then you got Sherbrooke. So Sherbrooke, it's 150 kilometers east from Montreal. This is a small town. It's the 6th town. Sorry for my pronunciation. It's not perfect, but 6th city in Quebec in terms of population. But I would say this is a little bit like State College. It's not a big town, but it's a town that is widely centrated onto the university. So we are a little bit cousins, I would say. And so Ghost, that you might know, was founded in 1984 by Professor Jean-Nicolas. We've been up to date usually 6 to 7 professors, depending on years, not including COVID. I would say 40 to 50 people. So we're gathering interns, students, postdoc, research assistants, technicians. We are still the largest Canadian acoustics and vibration research center in terms of importance, in terms of what we have, in terms of installations, several research chairs, industrial acoustics, aviation acoustics, transportation acoustics, and we've been Center of Excellence of the University of Sherbrooke for the last 20 years. The four main research area of goes with materials, meta materials, because you cannot do materials if you do not meta them somewhere. Vibro, aeroacoustics, active control, SHM, test characterization. These are the four poles, four things that make the goals live and grow for the last 40 years. But there is a problem, or there was. All the professors, researchers were from the same faculty, same department. But nowadays research indeed, research always came from all faculties and schools. But now it's becoming clear that research must be more diverse, multifaceted, and so is funding. That's maybe the main reason for this. Funding is becoming multi-diverse, whatever the name that you want to give to it. So the idea was to gather researchers by affinity, proximity of research topics, not in terms of faculty. So at University of Sherbrooke, there's been like a stream to push research centers. So this is a designation that is granted by the university. So you cannot launch your own research center. You must build it, present it to university, and then you are granted. Sorry for this. You are granted a research center. So they are specific funding for them, and we have now 22 research centers at the university. So what is CRASH? Actually, it's a mix of GOES, 7 people, then people coming from the engineering faculty, electrical, computer engineering, robotics, School of Music, Faculty of Medicine and Health Science, and it gives the Center of Research in Acoustic Signal Human, established 2020. So what it makes in terms of concrete things, so we moved from 7 to more than 20 professors. So that creates a more, I don't know what to say, massive research center. 20 people that can interact, teach, supervise, and so on. And then we moved from 4 main research teams to multifaceted and intertwined research teams. So the fact that we are centered on, sorry for the French here, but we are crossing acoustics, signal, and human. So in all this kind of frontiers boundaries, there's speech transmission, sound perception, sound and arts, ultrasound, medical imaging, musical acoustics, vibration control, materials design, aural acoustics, non-destructive testings, noise control, ultrasound, and sound field synthesis. A broad series of subjects that can help students, professors to first master the physics of mechanical waves and radiation from infrasound to ultrasound, to develop and deploy advanced instrumentation and control systems. This instrumentation can go from infrasound to ultrasound as well. And then always include the human element in the design of systems. Let's move on. So the mission of this center is to be at the highest international level in terms of scientific discoveries and technological innovations in acoustics. So we're bringing together mechanical waves, their signal, and their interaction with humans in a single research center. But more concretely, we're putting people and systems in different contexts. And these 2 pictures are really a good example of what we're doing. Somebody brought an ambisonic systems at the university, the Zelia ambisonic systems. The systems is tested in the Faculty of Engineering to make some source identification, but the systems is also brought in the School of Music. Yeah. To make students, musicians interact with the systems and so on. So we got people from the engineering, School of Music, and so on, that can give different point of view. Okay, so we are putting them in different contexts. The research center is also guided by students. This is really important. They are representative in the strategic committee to guide the research center. They can propose, if they propose action and if they are accepted, they implement the actions. And we ask them also to help us to improve the work conditions, because actually the students are the ones that are in the lab. As you know, I'm moving to a research position, assistant professor position 1 year ago, and I've spent 20 years in the lab, and I've spent my last year mostly in my office. So that's the reality. So we have to ask students to improve the work conditions, because they are those that are most aware of what could be done. Okay, so this is the Students' Day. So we're in Canada, so we ski and so on during winter, and we do like a yearly research day, which resembles actually the CAV workshop, and we're moving to this kind of workshop. That you are quite clearly inspiring us, because we really like that kind of format. What makes also the interest of this research center, we are bringing together all the resources. So we got manufacturing, instrumentation for everything, acoustic vibration, fluid, ultrasonic. We have a dedicated platform. We have the instrument platform from the University of Sherbrooke. So when we ask for funding, we have a team of 20 professors. We have a dedicated platform with the technician and so on that will take care of the things that we acquire by funding, which make us more powerful in terms of funding demands, actually, and more efficient into the day-to-day deal with the systems and so on. So an example is that we acquired new tools in 2022, 2 multi-material industrial printers, Markforged and Photocentrics. We were especially well ranked in the funding demand because of the structure and the specific platform. So these industrial printers, they allow meeting strong requirements in dimensional stability and repeatability, accuracy below 50 microns, as well as in terms of versatility. The mechanical properties can be varied between 0.5 and 50 gigapascals. Typically, I do a lot of defectometry, full field measurements, and this will help me to produce really controlled samples to be measured, so that it makes a link with the previous presentation. If I can have specific samples with different mechanical properties and surface properties, then I can really estimate what is the precision of my measurement method using specific samples. Our platform is quite large. We have 96 channel WFS. This stands for wave field synthesis. We got a wind tunnel in anechoic room, 50 channels ambisonics, a 3D laser vibrometer, coupled reverberant anechoic rooms, up to 250 microphones, visible infrared, high-speed cameras, 3D PIV, and I recently acquired these things. These are my buyings for 2022, multi-point laser Doppler vibrometer, automated impact hammers, and optic fiber microphones, because I'm moving to magnetic resonance imaging measurements. So you need something that is immune to this strong magnetic field. So you need optic fiber microphones. These are quite not that important, but in terms of communication, networking, being a larger group also improve the communication and the networking. And we have quite a lot of international collaboration, not as much as the CAV, but we do a lot of collaboration with France, and this comes from the language in Quebec. We are mostly Francophone and then Anglophones. So we got an international research project, which is named Centre Acoustique Jacques Cartier. We do a lot of research with the Kermit in Montreal. which is the Center for Interdisciplinary Research on Music, Media, and Technology. And we are an international liaison, and I'm really pleased to be one with the Center for Acoustics and Vibration. Quick words on the internal funding. What we do also is that we have a specific program and internal funding into the center, which helps to build the collaboration, because it's easy to put 20 people into a research center, but it's a little bit more difficult to make them collaborate. So the idea is to put some money somewhere, and there's each year we found small projects that can trigger some collaboration. So you find a colleague and you say, hey, why not starting something on that subject? Then you apply, then you get quickly $6,000. And usually you try to pair them with the faculty or the university, then you double the amount and so on. So you know the story, but it's a trigger point for this. So we really has that different people from different faculty collaborate together. So this is what we call an agile seed funding. We put a seed somewhere with a small amount of money, but it triggers collaboration, and it helps also to recruit students as well. So a few examples of what we do. So I present 3 colleagues. So this is François Grandin. He's within the electrical engineering and computer engineering department. So François is really focused on robot audition. So his goal is to say there are robots and they can hear as well. So why not thinking the robot audition like the human audition? So he put microphone arrays into robots. So he is working on speech comments for UGVs, so audio noise cancellation, keywords, spotting, localization, audio video speaker localization also. He's working also on dynamically reconfigurable arrays. This is, I don't know how many microphone arrays or loudspeaker arrays I've set up in my career, but it's always long, complicated. The more the microphones you have, the more the cables you have, the more trouble you get. Sorry, still once, I think there's an automatic timer that was kept. Sorry for this. So François helps us to use robotic arms to make dynamic microphone arrays. This is quicker, this is more precise, and is using the robot to shape optimization for noise cancellation and speech enhancement as well. And he's doing a lot of drone acoustics. So we had a couple of drones in our wind tunnel recently. I'm trying to, especially to track them, but more to make a package drop detection. So we're trying to monitor the change in velocity of propellers just by audio. So to locate them. And also he's working on fall detection. Another colleague, Nicholas, is really focused on ultrasound transducer and imaging for biomedical and industrial applications. So he designs ultrasound transducers, so mostly for biomedical and non-destructive. So he designed custom probes by laser micromachining, piezoceramic, piezo composites. He did a great job on real-time imaging acoustics. This is a microphone array that is being sold currently by a small company in Sherbrooke. So it's a 32 microphone MEMS microphone array that locates and evaluates sources of sound in real time using GPU. Using also, it now applies those kind of imaging applications to transcranial, imaging application, and is using ultrasound for automated inspection and industrial processes. I need some water, sorry. So here you got a small video. It's for wood pulp, so it's separating pulp from water using ultrasound, power ultrasound. So I'm sorry, the video is not that. Maybe if I skip it like this. No, still it's maybe too big. So it's acoustophoresis, drying the gases. So it's more industrial. And the last colleague I wanted to present is Philippe Michaud, is the crash director. And Philippe is really focused on mechatronic systems. So mechatronic systems, advanced signal processing, and adaptive control and acoustics. The most recent progress is what we call HAPS. It's an harmonic acoustic pneumatic source. So it's a high-level tonal noise, which is perfectly controlled in amplitude and phase. This has been published in Applied Acoustics. So from 10 hertz to 10 kilohertz, you got the high-level tonal noise that is controlled. So we managed to get a 186 dB SPL in duct with mean flow, which is quite interesting. And now is applying those HAPS for active control of tonal noise for aircraft noise. So the idea is to use high-level sound source, perfectly controlled in amplitude and phase to make active control. And then Philip is also involved into medicine for years now. So he has been instrumental. Sorry, I got it. To set up this liquid ventilator for research on liquid ventilation in mammals. So liquid ventilation means you collapse and then it's difficult to breathe. Then we put some flow-based liquid that is saturated in oxygen into your lungs, and it helps to lower your temperature as soon as possible, so to help save your life. But the goal here is to be able to control how you push the fluid into the lungs and how we control the flow of fluid into the lungs, which is quite complicated. And so this is me. So I'm still Olivier Robin. So in terms of research, I'm really trying to diversify research. I've been doing for years vibration imaging. I've presented in last year and the year before visible deflectometry and infrared deflectometry. So this is one of my core research subjects. So I have a funding from NSERC to support this for the next 5 years. So the idea is to be able to present you a complete measurement system, let's say in the next 5 years. So it should be feasible and to be able to measure vibration on various structures. So it can be aluminum, polished plates, but also wood as an example. I'm doing a lot of design characterization of metamaterials, but also characterization of organic materials. I ate this timer. By organic materials, I'm really focused on wood. Wood for building, there's a new building for the School of Engineering. I think it's mostly based on wood, on cross-laminated timber. That is actually made in Quebec by Shibugamo and Nordic Structures. These are typically composite materials. I mean, when you put wood like this, and then wood like this, and then wood like this, and then wood like this, and you got cross-laminating, it's a composite. So you have to deal with tricky things to understand how this behaves in terms of vibrations, so wave number, identification, and so on. You really need to go on this kind of methods to use this. So I do a lot of I use these methods for data crafting as well. So this is a result of homogeneous wave correlation. It's at 5 kilohertz, and you see that it's clearly elliptical. So we have a neat orthotropic structure detailed. And I do a lot now of binaural recordings and mapping with EEG electroencephalogram and magnetic resonance imaging. So I'm crossing what we do in the lab with EEG specialists and MRI specialists. More precisely in terms of research, what I do on wood for data crafting, Adirondack spruce, this is also known as red spruce. This is, I would say, a local wood that we can only find in North America. So it follows the Adirondack chain of mountains. So you find in Quebec, Nova Scotia, and down to North Carolina, I think. The idea is, can we just focus on local woods instead of importing rare woods? And there are not that much data on this kind of wood, but it has been used a lot in the beginning of of the 19th century, of the 20th century, sorry. So the idea is to carry on. So we are really benchmarking different methods. So we're using spatial vibration measurements, using the scanning laser vibrometer to extract the young modulus in the X and Y direction, using modal methods, or IWC, which stands for inhomogeneous wave correlation. So you see that depending on the direction, you get there's a ratio of 10 between Young's modulus. So this is really important to well estimate them in the two directions. And we also apply classical method to extract the damping loss factor. So by impact testing and using the decay rate method or the classical half bandwidth method, but we are really benchmarking them. And the idea is to make now the link with guitar crafters and see if these parameters that we estimate in the lab are then verified or found when the guitar is finally crafted using these boards. Another subject is teaching. So what I do a lot is teaching acoustic with smartphones. I'll precise it later. And I use what I call other media. I'm a comics writer as well, so I teach comics for science communication, and I help students to transform their research into something more digest that they can use to reach the general public or even their family, because usually students have some difficulties to explain their family what they are doing during their MSc or Ph.D. thesis. So, and we're trying to tell them that you can be a mechanical engineer or whatever, but you can have some other things, interest in your life, and you might be a comics writer or a musician, so you can combine them. You can use all these kind of things that you know. So this is an example. But for teaching, I noticed something. So I have a smartphone here, and I'm supposed to end in 30 seconds, so I'll be 2 minutes late. I have a smartphone, but you cannot call me. I got no number. It's been 12 years, and I still do not have a number. But I like the tool. This is a fantastic tool. And I noticed that smartphone is the most common trait of students because of all of them have a smartphone. That's the most common trait. Yeah. Stop. Yep, you see, I'm not really good with this. My assumption is simple. If I combine smartphone applications and short experiment analysis, I can offer mobile and experiential learning. So it allows practical implementation of inclusive and diverse learning as well. So I've set up smart AcuLabs, smartphone-based acoustic laboratories. So you see here, I'm filling up a quarter wavelength tube with water. And you see the harmonics. You've seen them. The idea is to make some really simple labs that students can do at home. Set up a quarter wavelength. So I've got a quarter wavelength tube, Helmholtz resonator, some level summation wall for coherent or non-coherent source, the beat effect, the vibration frequency of a rotating engine. The example is my Ford Focus, and I managed to retrieve by 2 helping names the idling frequency of my car. So this is something that they can do. This is really friendly, and they just apply what they learned. And finally, I do a lot of dissemination. So I work a lot on setting up exhibition comics. So you get some examples of Draw Your Science that are co-edited. I do a lot of demonstrations for the general public. I like making this accessible for people. They really enjoy it. And so this is an example of what I did recently with Le Mans. Le Mans is quite well known, the Lobe. It's a quite big acoustic research laboratory in France. And what we are trying to do, so you can go to the link here. It's the online exhibition. So we try to combine demonstrators, comics-like posters, and video. So at the end, we combine this. It's the Lindsay's Wheel of Acoustics. I thought this could be refreshed. So I worked with a colleague of mine to make a drone, Lindsay's Wheel of Acoustics. This should be online, I would say in 6 months. Drone posters, more intended for the kids and the family, and some example videos. Yeah, this will work now. So on the left, it's a concrete guitar, so you only hear the string. On the middle, it's on the soundboard, and on the right, you get the complete guitar. So just to explain what are the roles of the different elements. And I'm still not late. So thank you. Thank you. I'll wait a time where this option is. Thank you so much.
You have time for some questions? In one of your slides, you're showing your capabilities and instrumentation and equipment that you have. You talked about an automated impact hammer. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is and what you do with it?
Yeah, so these are quite new, and I think this will be quite popular in the coming years. I don't know how many impacts I've done in my life. This is like, you have to be the guy that really know how to put 20 newtons plus minus, let's say 3 newtons. But that's the problem. So several companies, there is Multits in Germany, and you can write to me. I've searched all the market. It seems Polytech is trying to move on also. So the idea is that you get a controller, you get an automatic impact hammer. So simply they use the classical model hammers, but combine them with automated things. And then you can say, okay, I'd like to have 5 newtons each 10 seconds, please. And then you got 5 newtons each 10 seconds. So you're repeatable. If you wanna study nonlinearity, I think that's the best tool in the world. Let's say 5 newtons, 10 newtons, and so on, until you can really estimate this. So it's you got the classical miniature one and the more classical model one. I think this will be an asset, especially for me. This is for the validation of the deflectometry measurement, because I'm still looking to really have firm validations and estimations of the accuracy of the method. So I need to be able to make measurements today and in 2 years, and being sure that I had the same conditions. No problem. Well, thank you.
Say Olivier? Sorry, the disembodied voice.
Yes, dear.
So I got on my phone and I typed in Smart Acou Labs in the App Store, but it isn't there. I'm assuming that this is still just for Sherbrooke students. Or are you planning on making it generally available soon?
No, Smart Acou Labs is the series of videos and associated content that you will soon find on YouTube. I'm relying on several. You can write an email to me, Steve, but there will be a paper that should be published soon in the IOP, the Institute of Physics, and then it will make a summary of the apps that I'm using and how I do use them. I would recommend Phyphox, Phyphox. That's crazy. You just got access to all the sensors that are actually in your phones. And my students, when I ask them to calculate the speed of sound, they now just say, okay, what's the current atmospheric pressure? And I'm reading, I get the reading of the atmospheric pressure right there. So let's use it as a tool and not just as something to communicate. I hope this answered the question, Steve.
Yes, thank you. And thanks again for coming down. It's always
My
neat to see what's going on.
Thank you so much.
A crash.
Okay, so we are at our morning break. Please come back at about 10:30 for our next talk. If you need the restrooms, out the door, take a right, and the restrooms are on the left. So. And if you have any other questions, I'll be around. Feel free to ask me, or Kelly's in the back. You can ask Kelly if you're a presenter and you have presentation questions.